Hey everybody, Mike Wardinsky here, and today I'm going to show you how to set up your Canon R5 Mark II straight out of the box. There's a lot of settings within the menu of this camera, but I'm going to show you how I set up my camera so I'm ready to be more productive and more efficient when I go out to shoot. First thing we need to do is pull up our camera menu system. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Menu, and here we are. So we want to change image quality, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Set on the back of the camera. Right here, we're set to large. I'm going to hit Set once more, and I'm going to take that to 10. And now, I typically don't shoot in JPEG or HEIF, but if I do, I want to shoot in the best quality. And so that's why I'm doing this. We're going to hit Set. And then the rest I'm going to leave be because I'm not going to be shooting in those smaller sizes at all. So we're just going to hit Menu to back out. And then image type size, we're going to go ahead to RAW by moving the top dial on the camera. And then JPEG, HEIF, I'm actually going to use the aperture wheel and take that to this little dash line. That means I'm not going to be recording any JPEGs at all, only the RAW files. Now, if you wanted to record JPEG and RAW, we could leave this set over here, but that's going to take up a lot more space on your card. So as long as you're comfortable shooting RAW, you're not brand new to photography, I would recommend just shooting straight RAW. Now on this camera, we do have the option to shoot compressed RAW, that's C-RAW, but I'm gonna leave this to RAW for now and hit OK. Our cropping aspect ratio, we're gonna leave full, and we're gonna go to the next menu by moving the shutter wheel. In the second red menu, we have ISO speed settings. So I'm gonna go down here. I'm gonna hit down on the multi-controller, and I'm going to go down to the ISO speed range. I'm going to click down again. And on minimum, I'm going to hit set and then go down to L50, which is an expanded ISO. It technically gives you a little bit less dynamic range than ISO 100, but there may be times where you want to shoot a nice long exposure, and going down to ISO 50 might help you do that. So that's why I like to set that to 50. And again, this is just the minimum ISO range. It's not saying that we have to shoot at 50, it just allows us to shoot at 50 if we want to. So we're gonna go to the next menu, and there are a few adjustments we're gonna do here. Picture style, you can leave to standard. If you're a landscape photographer, one thing I like to do sometimes is go to picture style, so I'll hit set, and I'll use the aperture wheel to scroll down to user defined number 1, and then I will hit info, and then I'm gonna come down to saturation, and hit the set button. And then I can take this up to like 3 or 4 even. And what this will do is saturate the LCD screen. So that way when you're out in the field shooting, you kind of get excited about what you're shooting. This has zero effect on the raw image once it's imported to the computer. This will, however, affect JPEG images if you're shooting JPEGs. So be aware of that. And then I'm gonna hit OK. And then menu to back out. Now, if I were going to be photographing people or sports or animals, I probably wouldn't want this saturation cranked up, and I might just go up to the top to standard and hit OK. Color space, by default, it's sRGB. This only affects the JPEGs, but if you are shooting JPEGs, even if you're not, I would recommend moving this to Adobe RGB. That way, if you accidentally shoot only JPEG, you're at least shooting a JPEG with more color space available. And that's all we need to change in this menu. Red menu number 4, there's nothing we need to change here, so we're gonna keep going. Nothing here. Now in red menu number 6, we have our shutter mode. This is going to be important to pay attention to. You may want to switch this on and off. Right now, it's set to electronic shutter. If I click here, I can go to mechanical or electronic first curtain. So the electronic first curtain mode is partial mechanical, partial electronic. It basically allows you to use the electronic shutter for the first curtain, which can help minimize camera shake. And lastly, we have mechanical shutter, and this can be useful if you want to shoot for longer than a half a second. And also, the mechanical shutter can sometimes provide a slightly higher quality image than the electronic shutter. And right now, I'll just leave this on electronic, and then we'll hit OK. Next, we have release shutter without card. You want to turn this off. You don't want to be taking photos, thinking you're taking photos, and then realize, whoops, you forgot to put a card in the camera. The only time you'd want to turn this back on is if you're shooting tethered to a computer. You might have to turn this setting back on. But by default, I like to leave this off. In red menu number 7, we have customized quick controls. You might want to adjust these. So if you do, come down here and hit set, and we can choose edit layout. Okay, so here we're on the customized quick control screen, and there's a few things I want to turn off, and there's a few things I want to add. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and get rid of the crop aspect ratio. I don't use that a ton, so I'm going to turn that off. I'm also going to turn off the image type and size. I certainly don't need to use that from this menu. And I might adjust some of these others depending on how much space I have. Anti-flicker shoot, I'm going to turn that off. And so now we're going to scroll down and we're going to turn on a couple of things. The first thing is going to be the focus bracketing. This is so I have easy access to the focus bracketing menu right from the quick control screen. Then I'm going to come over to IS mode. This is in case I want to turn off the image stabilizer. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. Pre-continuous shooting, I want to turn this on. I want to be able to easily access this if I'm shooting wildlife. I want to be able to just hit that Q button and easily get to the pre-record. And I have space for one more, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on focus guide. And you can see at the top right corner, we have 11 of 11 spots filled, and we're going to hit menu to escape. And we're going to go ahead and save and exit. In red menu number 8, we have a couple of options I'm not going to change, but I do want to point out. The first is blackout free display. This is by default set to off. If we want to turn that on, I just click on it and head up to on. Now, what this does is it prevents the screen from blacking out when you're shooting continuous shots. But there is a slight chance of some lag time that could happen when you turn this on. So by default, I'm going to go ahead and leave this off. And then display simulation, we want to make sure that's set to exposure simulation, which it is by default. Under shooting info display, if I click here, we have a couple of different options. If we wanted to turn on a grid, I could do that right here. I could also change the histogram from brightness to RGB, which shows me the brightness of the red, green, and blue channels. So if you want to switch that, you can do that right here. This is also where we change the electronic level size, the amount of free space that we have on a card, lens info display, and vertical exposure level. Moving on, I'm going to move to the purple menu, the autofocus menu, and I'm going to go to number 2. And subject to detect is by default set to people. If you're photographing people, sports, portraits, it'd be good to keep it here. If you're a wildlife photographer, we're going to click here and we're going to go over to animals and then click set. Eye detection, we're going to leave set to auto, but we could come here and choose a right or left eye, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that set to auto. In purple menu number 3, we have our servo autofocus character, and by default, this is set to auto. And I'm going to come down to manual. Now I'm going to hit the rate button to adjust the tracking sensitivity, and then I'm going to press down on the multi-direction controller in order to make an adjustment. And I want to set this to locked on. Once I get my subject locked on, I want it to stay there. So I'm going to go to -2 and then hit set. Underneath tracking sensitivity, we have acceleration and deceleration. And if I hit down on the control pad, I can tell the camera what type of subject I'm tracking. If I'm tracking a subject that's kind of slow and steady, and I want to sort of avoid possible obstacles, I'm going to go to the left, maybe -1 or -2. If I'm tracking a subject that's erratic and it's hard to predict, I'm going to come over here and go to the +1 or even 2. If you're not really sure, you can go ahead and just leave this set in the center and hit OK. Now we have our release priority. This is how quickly the camera will take the photo. Do you want to weigh priority on getting a shot or getting a really sharp shot? In my case, I tend to prefer a shot that's sharp than just any shot at all. So I'm going to go to servo first image priority, and I'm going to set this to focus. And I'm going to go to one shot autofocus release priority, and I'm going to leave this on focus as well. Purple menu number 6 is where I can turn on some of the manual focus settings like focus peaking and focus guide. But if you remember, I turned on the focus guide to my Q menu, so I don't need to come in here anymore. Moving along to the blue playback menu, there's not a ton in here that we need to change. I'm going to go to menu number 4, highlight alerts, and I'm going to hit enable. This is going to cause any part of the image that is overexposed to flash at me. That way I know I've overexposed part of the image. Sometimes people don't like it and it's distracting. If you don't, go ahead and leave it disabled, but I think it's pretty useful, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave this enabled. Next, we have network settings, and this is the menu that's going to allow you to connect your camera to a smartphone or tablet. This is a pretty in-depth process, so I'm gonna go ahead and cover this in another video coming up. So now would be a really great time for you to go ahead and hit the like button down below this video. And of course, don't forget to subscribe because I've got plenty of more tutorials coming out on the Canon R5 version 2. Now we have yellow menu number 1, and there is some stuff we're gonna change here, and that is auto rotate. I think this is a really important feature to change because if you don't change this, whenever you shoot vertically with your camera, the images are gonna be, you're gonna have to tilt your head sideways to look at them. So we're gonna go ahead and click the set button, and instead of leaving this set to camera and computer, we're gonna turn it to only on the computer. That way when I shoot a vertical image on a tripod, I don't have to turn my head sideways to look at it. Date and time, this is another important one, especially if you're shooting with multiple cameras. Your time gets recorded into the metadata of each photo, and you want to be able to know what time the photo was taken at. So we do need to set this. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit set here. And I'm gonna go ahead and set it to today's date. And now I need to set the time. And I have the option to turn daylight savings on or off. I'm gonna leave that off for now. And then I'm gonna set the time zone to Denver. There we go. And hit set, and I'm gonna hit OK. And next, the most important setting of all, we have the beep. I typically like to disable this completely, but if you're somebody who might want to hear a beep, we can go down to volume. Then we can adjust the volume of the beep for 5 different controls on the camera. So for example, if I want to only have a beep when focusing, I could scroll down here and I could turn that up and hit OK. But if I didn't want to have anything on the shutter, I could turn this all the way down, hit OK, and then I could turn the rest down as well. So now I'll only have a beep when I focus. Now, personally, I don't like any sound, so I'm actually gonna back out of this by hitting the menu, and I'm gonna go to beep and just hit disable. Next, in yellow menu number 5, we have custom shooting modes, and I'm not gonna get to this in this tutorial, but I will do a tutorial on how to set up custom shooting modes and ways you might like to do that. But for now, we're gonna keep moving on. Next, we have our custom controls in the green menu, and there are some settings here you might want to change. I like to set my camera up for back button focus, and so this is where we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna hit the set button, and by default, the shutter button starts autofocus and meters. We're gonna move this over using the control pad to meter only, and then hit set. So now whenever I hold the shutter down, it's only going to start metering, it won't autofocus. If I want to autofocus, I can hit the AF on button, which is on the back side of the camera. And the benefit of setting up back button focus is you only focus when you tell the camera to focus. And it basically allows you to switch between servo and single shot autofocus just by using your thumb. You hold the button down, servo continues, or you just tap the button, get focus, and then let go, and the camera's not going to focus again until you tell it to by hitting the AF on button. And so now I wanna customize some other buttons. So I'm gonna scroll down here, and we're gonna get to the asterisks. I'm gonna go ahead and hit set, and I'm gonna change this to eye detection. So IAF. That way I can hit this button, and I'm automatically gonna switch from autofocus to autofocus that locks on the eye. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave that and hit set. And then right next to the eye button, we have this icon right here. I'm gonna hit set again, and I'm gonna set this to start, stop, whole autofocus area and hit set. So now I have 3 autofocus buttons kind of all right next to each other that are easy to access on the back side of the camera. Lastly, in the green menu, we have eye control, and I have a video that I'm working on right now that's gonna show you how to set this up. So again, don't forget to like and subscribe and keep an eye out for that. Now we're in the orange menu. There's a few things I want to point out here that you might want to change. In the first menu, we have number of bracketed shots. This is for when you're bracketing. By default, it's set to 3. If you're shooting a high contrast scene, you might want to take this up to 5 shots or even 7 shots. But for right now, I'll leave it set to 3 for default. And then moving over, we have continuous shooting speed. We can limit how many frames the camera shoots in continuous shooting, which is really useful because at high speed, it's 30 frames, and that's a lot. So if I want to go ahead and adjust this, I can click on it and hit set, and we can go ahead and limit that to 20 or 30. And then we can go to our high speed and do the same. We can go to 12, 10, 7.5. Let's keep that at 10. And low speed, I'll leave set to 5. Now, of course, this is very subject dependent, and there may be times where you want to shoot at 30 frames a second. Also, keep in mind that this is only for the electronic shutter. If you're using the manual shutter, your high-speed continuous is a maximum of 12 frames per second. And lastly, so I'll just hit OK to escape out of this. And in the last orange menu, I want to turn off retract lens on auto power off. I'm going to go ahead and hit disable. Now, even though I don't have any retractable lenses, sometimes if you leave this on, the autofocus can change when you turn the camera on and off. And so that can be a little bit frustrating. So that's why I turned this off. If you decide you got through all these settings and you like to reset them to the factory default, you can come down here to clear all custom functions. And lastly, we have our green star menu, and this is where you can add any items from any of these other menus into the star menu. That's it. Wow.